Yeah, hi. I think that was something that I just really thought about while during our Zoom class and then also during our readings was how,
Yeah.
Jesus is working, but yet he didn't have a salary. And asking those questions that was in the definition, is it fulfilling the person? Is it benefiting the community? Is it glorifying the Lord? Asking that with his ministry and realizing that there's no question about salary or question about anything along those terms. And I think,
Yeah.
especially as an American, we're taught that work is salary, that our identity is in work, and you're accomplished if you have a higher salary. But that's not what it says in the Bible.
Yeah. I remember I was, maybe Daniel can weigh in on this. I had a student in my theology of work class years ago. In fact, that class actually took place in Addis. Hi, Sunny. We've not started. We just kind of, although the class have started. I mean, there's no formal way of starting.
Hi there, everyone.
Yeah, I had this student in my class years ago. That was 2016 in Addis, and he said something about the maybe this is true about the Chinese culture, that they don't do anything for free. And the question that I, just like Leah referred it to Jesus, I said, when God gave Adam work in the garden, what was Adam's salary? What was Adam's salary? What was Adam, promised, or something like that? So we discover that work is not just a means of getting an income. The reward for work is intrinsic. To be able to work is a blessing. And that's why the definition of John Stott is really, it really drives it home. Yeah, we'll discuss more on this today because that's a worldview issue. So let's welcome everyone that is coming in. Yeah, I think we have someone that joined us in the course of the week. That is, correct me if I pronounce your name wrongly, Marcia.
Yes, it's Marcia. That's
Marcia.
Correct. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Marcia.
Marcia joined us in the course of the week. So you're welcome to the class. Just one sentence introduction of yourself. And then we were not opportune to meet Harry also last week. So just one sentence and we'll get into this, the discussion today.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon or good day, wherever you are. Noted before, my name is Marcia Walker, and one sentence, I guess my sentence is up, but I am located in Columbus, right outside of Columbus, Ohio, in Reynoldsburg, and I've been in this state for quite some time, but I'm originally was born in Guyana, South America. And so I've I became aware of Baki several years ago when my pastor from back home that I grew up with, Pastor Dr. Raphael Messiah, he graduated, and we attended that graduation in Texas. And so I was searching for quite some time before for a program, and I truly believe it's just the Lord led me at this time, because I've vacillated back and forth over the years if I wanted to do this. So I am certainly grateful, honored to be here and to meet all of you. So thank you.
Yeah, that's about 56 sentences there, but that's okay.
My apologies.
You're welcome, Marcia. Just take me as I am. I can pick on people, but I like what I do. That's why I work this way. So Harry, we've met before, so if I pick on you, you won't be surprised.
Oh yeah, thank you. So my name is Harry Hawkins, and I live in Wisconsin.
which is right underneath Canada, basically. And so I am waiting for it to get cold because it's going to be almost 80 degrees today. And I have a new jacket I want to wear. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Harry. So you're all welcome. And Suni is working right there. We have myself and Suni connected in the course of the week. So the presentation that you're going to be seeing today, we need to, there have been some, translation attached to it for the sake of our students from Korea. And it's such an exciting thing for me. And I'm always, I count myself blessed, to be a professor in BGU, and they always give me this very excitingly challenging assignments to be able to, to do what has never been done before. The last time I taught a course where we traveled virtually to 8 cities in 8 weeks, and we were actually in Guyana. So that's yeah. And it was such an exciting thing. BGU is a global university, and that's one of our distinctive features. So when you come into our community, you have the opportunity of connecting with people from other cultures, from other contexts. They can learn from you, you can learn from them. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation on Populi this week. Alan just set the place ablaze. And Harry doesn't come, behind in such things too. The whole thing is sort of getting heated up. This is an adult class. There are no right or wrong answers. You just need to state, your case, ask questions. If someone sort of misinterprets what is going on in your context, all you need to do is to explain. That's not the way we are. This is it, because there are many things said on, in the media. One of the things that happened during the immersion course that we did online was our presenter from Moscow, Russia. A lot of us, we were shocked at, number one, the level of Christianity in Russia, because the world doesn't know anything about it. The development in Russia, we were shocked by a lot of realities, a lot of news that came out of there. You can hardly find a slob in Russia. I mean, you can imagine that. So these are the kind of things that you get to learn in BGU. And this course, the Theology of Work course, is our signature course. It's our, it's the course that actually reveals our DNA. All the courses that we learn in BGU is actually anchored on Theology of Work. And because we believe, just like we shared last week, that work is ontological. Work is, human beings are work tools. God created us to work. That's the first thing God gave to humans. And that is the primary way that God honors human beings. So whatever good can be done on earth will always be done through the channel of work. Whatever evil that will be done on earth will also be done through the channel of work. How we work, where we work, with whom we work, those things are very, very critical. So if you look at colonialism, it was work-centered. Slavery, it was work-centered. Any country, society that is prosperous is tied to their work ethics or work values. Any form of oppression, we have some sort of work attached to it. Any form of liberation, we have some sort of work where people can work. I'm currently in Windhoek, Namibia, and they told me that while they were under apartheid, there are areas in town where, Namibians cannot access to work. And there are some other areas, the only way we can access it is through work. So work is really something we have to learn, right? So let me also welcome Dr. Temple that is joining us. Today is Dr. Temple is he's just shadowing this course. He's one of our professors in BGU, and is my fellow Nigerian, brother. So good to see you, Sam.
Hey, brother. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Great. So you're welcome. So today this is our week 2, and we are going to talking about the very, very important subject, which is worldview, how that affects work, how it affects ministry, how it affects work ethics, it's very central, it's very foundational to the thoughts that we share, in this course. So I'm going to share my screen. Like I said, what you are going to be seeing, myself and Suni, we've worked on it, and we've inserted some Korean, just give me a sec, it's going to come up shortly. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. I hope our Korean brothers can see the translations there. We ended last week with the introduction to theology of work, and we looked at the two mandates, the creation mandate and the redemption mandate. And we established that those mandates are connected. They are eternal. What I've done here is like a scriptural framework. It's better when I do a slideshow of this. Yeah. It's a scriptural framework of theology of work. This is a scripture-based understanding of the importance of work. In the beginning, God created man in his image, in his likeness. And the man was created to do creative, meaningful work. And that is the means by which the human subdues, manages, steward the earth. The outcome is love, joy, and peace. Patrick, Leah, if you want to talk about the salary package for that work, it's love, joy, and peace. The purpose of it, not basically a reward, but the experience that the human being gets. So things will have been like that, but for sin. So this is the creation mandate. But where our Bible scholars, we know that Satan came, tempted the human, fell into sin. Things will have been just human stewarding the earth. And then there will be shalom. Shalom means nothing missing, nothing broken. Let me hide this panel. Okay. No, I think I hit the wrong thing there. Show video panel. Okay, right. So Satan came, tempted man, the man fell into sin. And we said that fall caused 4 major breaks between man and God, between man and himself or herself, between man and fellow men, between man and the world. And work, which was meant to be creative, meaningful, to subdue the earth, became destructive, became toilsome labor, and then we use it to exploit others. All evil on earth is tied to that. When you have labor camps, when you have, people not being well rewarded for work, not being well remunerated, toxic work environments. So we misuse, we waste and destroy what we have been blessed with. That fall, God said to man, you will have to sweat to earn a living. Relationship will not be fulfilling. We mistreat the poor, the orphan, the widow, the aliens amongst us. And then we will now work for personal pleasure in our attempt to satisfy the demons of greed, pride, lust. Rather than being blessed with love, joy, and peace, it was a curse of self-centeredness, vanity, and discord. So life becomes a struggle to survive, a hopeless and never-ending search for satisfaction. When you look at it, this affects the totality of life. It inspires many thoughts, many actions. It even inspires some, gospel variants. If you look at some cultures, the gospel is a means of survival. the means of survival, you know, all those kind of give and it shall be received and all those kind of things came out of we reading the scripture from a wrong standpoint. But that's not the end. Christ came and redeemed and gave us the Holy Spirit. The primary purpose of the Holy Spirit is not for human beings to speak in tongues. It's to work as God intended. That is to redeem us from the power of sin, to live meaningful life. And then we are back with spirit enablement to walk God's way, to become joyful stewards of God's creation, to reclaim the kingdom for the master. So God's redemptive purpose becomes our focus. And then the primary purpose of work, love, joy, and peace is restored. And then we have shalom. So this is like a scripture-based framework of the whole story of this worker God, the way he wants to relate with worker humans, so that the world experiences shalom, just as it was in the beginning. So God created man to be his co-workers in stewarding this creation. So when we take our conversations from this standpoint, we discover that suddenly the answer to most of the questions that's been asked in the world is answered. Those questions are answered. In the kingdom, neither male or female, no slave or free, you know, no Jew or Greek. People work based on their God-made uniqueness. So this is like a summary of what we did last week. Any questions before we go on? Because today we are going to worldviews, how that affects work, how that has shaped the gospel, how that has shaped ministry, how that has shaped human dignity. Any questions before we move on? Or comments? So I hope the translations are clear enough. And for those who are reading in English, I hope it's not too confusing. Some of us will leave this class. Some of us will leave this class with some words in Korea. Yeah. Yeah, I had someone try to say something. Any questions, please, before I move on?
This is Akofia. I just had a comment. It's something I'm just thinking through as you talk. I'm thinking about the stewarding bit of it, that God created us to be workers and steward, or look after whatever he has created. I'm trying to think through if we were not there to do the stewarding, does that mean that things would have gone wrong? I don't know. I'm trying to think through that, the positioning of man to look after.
Yeah.
Is it that if we are not looking after, then things are growing oddly or going out of sync or something?
You are very correct. The reason man fell was because it was a failure of stewardship. God gave human this world. The earth is like God's real estate, and we are the managers. We are the property managers. There's going to be a session on stewardship, but suffice to say at this time that God gave us this place to manage, and the terms and conditions of that management is what he gave to Adam and Eve. Out of every tree in the garden you may freely eat, but this don't. If you do, this will happen. One other instruction came from someone who is not the employer. And Adam decided to obey this strange alien voice. So God's instruction, which is the tool with which he's supposed to govern the earth, he neglected it and he lost it. So when you look at stewardship, is better understood with owner steward kind of. The word steward is, is that Greek word oikonomos, which means someone who manages a household, is where we get the word economics. You know, somebody who manages a house, or somebody who is in charge of something that doesn't belong to him or her. But if you give me your car, you tell me where the security is, you tell me some features of the car, I can't operate that car otherwise. I might destroy it. So that's what happened when we don't steward the earth, and you can put that in a global space. When humans don't manage the earth according to God's prescription, is a recipe for chaos. And today, a lot of people who are masquerading as the managers of the earth don't have a relationship with God. So they still do it, the earth still get hurt. And the earth there is all inclusive. So God never relinquished ownership of the earth, he only relinquished management. The manager can mess things up big time. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right. I always say that, yes, go ahead.
I have a question on the chat box there.
Yeah, please just mention your name and then go ahead.
Andreas.
Okay, Rias.
Andreas. I'm saying, can we say that workman's original vocation?
Man's what?
Women. Original vocation.
Okay.
Yeah. Can we say it?
Can we say what? Please just say it clearly. I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I'm from internet cafe and my voice is down. I'm saying, can we say work is man's or women's original vocation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Okay.
The primary assignment God gave to man was work. We are created to work. All right. So let's do today, we're going to be looking at worldviews. We live in a world of worldviews. What is a worldview? And then we're going to be looking at what will a biblical worldview look like? And how does that affect work, vocation, calling? So when we look at theology of work, it gives us, you know, it enables us to envision work in its original design. When we look at it through that lens, and these are the kind of principles that we looked at last week. I'm not going to, you know, waste too much time on this. So when we look at worldview, implications for work, ministry, and human dignity, we have to start from the primary assignment that Jesus gave to his church. And we look at that on three levels: on the level of knowledge of God, the structure of his church, and the assignment of the church. And that's what I mean by theology, ecclesiology, and missiology. There's a lot of logies there, you know. So we're going to look at that on those three levels. I always like to start with this quote here. It said, if your perception or conception of God, I'm using my laptop today, so it's kind of small. I normally use the desktop at home. If your conception of God is radically false, the more devout you are, the worse it will be for you. If your understanding of God, if your worldview of God, if your conception of God is false, the more devout you get, the worse it becomes for you. You say you'll be opening up yourself, your soul, to be molded by something base. It's better to be an atheist. That's by William Temple. He was once the Archbishop of Canterbury. When you look at this quote, what comes up for you? I want us to read it, and thank God the translation is there. And Suni, please, if anyone is saying something there, you can just buzz me.
If if your thinking, your belief is wrong, and you go even deeper and deeper thinking the wrong things, the deeper you go into the wrong direction,
yeah,
the worse off you become.
yeah, yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what comes to my mind to follow up on what Apophia just said is that with that thinking and going in the wrong direction, you may not have, of course, you don't have that awareness. So I think what I gather from this quote is that that's why it's worse, because, you know, you could be, you're very wrong, heading in the wrong direction and have no clue, no insight. And so that curiosity or that openness to truth, the further you go, it may not be there, If you're an atheist, you perhaps in some ways a blank canvas, and maybe more open to, maybe there's opportunity to shine the light and convince you otherwise.
Yeah. Any other thoughts there? Yep.
I'm thinking of an analogy of having a ladder on the wrong side of the wall. Then if you keep climbing up the ladder, you're in the wrong direction. So it's very important for you to lean your ladder on the right direction. Then as you climb higher, you're reaching your goal. So it's very important where you put your ladder on the right direction. So that is an analogy that I came across in many different workshops. But I think I can apply to here. If you lean your ladder in the wrong way, which is your misconcept of God, then if you radically climbing up the ladder, you're going in the opposite direction of the right direction. So that's the picture that come in mind that I have.
Yeah, like someone said, if you are going south, your back must be to north. Yeah. If you are facing,
also,
yeah, please go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, you know, I have one question that, you know, how we make a judgment that somebody who believes in God, their conception of God is false or correct, because, you know, I believe that we are affected by where we grow up. For example, which church we go to, and which teachings we learn from the pastor, for example. Then I'm sure that when I grew up in a church, I mean, a specific denomination, for example, then I'm sure that I would believe in that teachings.
Yeah.
And basically, I do have a trust in that, you know, pastors, and also that I will believe that that is true. Then how can I know that my believing is false?
Wow, that's a very, now that set the stage for worldviews, right? That set the stage for worldviews. Now, Daniel,
yeah,
we can have different interpretations of you. We can have personal opinions of you.
Yeah.
Because there is a Daniel, and Daniel is who Daniel is.
Yeah.
But many times I'm looking at Daniel from the side, from the right side, and I'm describing Daniel just using his ears.
Yeah.
So many times we are just like the story of the 4 blind men who were touching the elephant. Right? But to understand the elephant, we need someone to guide us, you know, to be able to see the elephant from all sides. Sometimes churches and their doctrines are wrong because they are using their own, you know, and that's what we call heresy in theological circle. When you use the part to define the whole. I read a book by, you know, the Heavenly Man that came out of China. I don't know, many of you might have seen the book in, you know, in Asia. The Heavenly Man. He spoke about the unity of the church in China before Western influence. He said for years they might have only 1 page of the Bible, and that's what they preach. And they were so committed. But when Bible started coming, they had a larger kind of revelation about the Bible, you know, and the church exploded. But after a while, When the Presbyterians send their Bible, they put in a Bible study manual. When the Methodists send their Bible, they put in the Methodist Bible, study manual. When the Anglicans send, and before 1 year, the church fragmented because of those denominational kind of, today, those denominational kind of interpretation, they are worldviews. They've shaped a lot of things. I was taken to the church in Pretoria where apartheid was inaugurated. Because they read Genesis 1:26 and they said the beasts are Africans that need to be dominated. It wasn't the devil that started apartheid or slavery or those kind of things. It was a biblical interpretation. So the question you raise is so critical. How do we know this is the correct one? But for me, it takes a humility to learn. It takes being listened. Listen to the others, and a sincerity to know God. God will ensure that you are in the light. Good question, Daniel. It set us, into some thinking. This saying, that thought brought this. I think this statement is credited to a guy called Greg Boyd. He said, "A strong faith with poor theology is dangerous." A strong faith with poor theology. That is what happens when you keep going in the wrong direction. So what we believe about God is the most important thing about us, because the more zealous we are, the more important it is, because we are more likely to act on what we believe. What we believe about work, about ministry, about gospel, about vocation, about calling, is we need to ensure that that is based on sound biblical foundation. Who is called by God? Can there be an uncalled Christian? These are the questions that we want to really answer, because just like we have it in the world, we also have it in the church. We live in a world of worldviews. We are being blown around to by all winds of doctrines, like Paul said. This is a time to really find a very solid ground. Pope Francis said, the world is already in the grip of the Third World War. And he said it's the world war of worldviews. The world is driven, is ruled by ideologies and philosophies, and those are products of worldviews. All of us seated here were products of one worldview or the other. Government policies are shaped by worldviews. Cultures are shaped by worldviews. So we have to be able to sift through all that and be able to say, what is the view of God here? And this is my own comment, that there are times when ideologies and philosophies were written in books and taught in institutions, but today they are written in hearts and minds of people, and they are adopted as worldviews. And people are convinced, like Daniel said, that that's what I believe, that's my opinion. In an opinionated world, how do we get God's opinion out there? Oops, I think I missed something there. So, how scriptural are our held beliefs and worldviews about work, about mission, about ministry, about human dignity? These are the kind of questions that we want to try and answer. What's the worldview? We want to try and put some definitions to this before we apply it to work and ministry and human dignity. Josiah, yes, sorry, just stop me anytime and ask a question.
Yeah,
is that Temple?
Oh yeah, or some.
Please go ahead. We are many on this call. When you want to talk, mention your name and then just go ahead.
Okay. Sunil Kim is saying some things which I think may be interesting. I am very little learned in Korean, and I thought that maybe with the chats that are going on, occasionally Daniel could just maybe express what something that Sunil or someone else may be saying. that will give her or him the expression. Maybe she wants to express something, but she's putting it in the chat, and you may not notice. And some of them are referring to Daniel. If there is something that he may interject and just raise up, that would be good.
Thank you very much, Temple. Sunni, please feel free to interject.
Yes.
So
what do you mean? What chat do you mean, Osam?
In the chat, Sunil's made some.
Are you able to read Koreans, right?
Yeah, Sunil is saying something, and I don't know if there are things that may be interesting to the class. I don't know if you are looking at the chats that are coming.
I'm not, because I can't read Korean. You can read Korean, so maybe it makes
sense.
Osam
can read Korean. Yeah.
Yes,
I can
incredible.
read.
Yes, yeah, he can.
Just a little, I can read.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking if Daniel could just go through as the class goes on, and then from time to time he expresses.
So that we can have a good learning experience here. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Sam, for that comment.
Thank you.
So we have a Nigerian that can read Korean. So
yeah. What I just translated is that we have to shift the worldviews that influences every area of our life.
Yeah.
I think that is what that said. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. You know, I'm loving this because I'm a global citizen, and I will really want, you know, I love this world. So this guy wrote this book, The Universe Next Door, you know, and it resonated with me, having learned under, you know, Rebecca, who is a global missionary, you know, that the world is no longer far from each other. We are now globally proximate. He said a worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart. It can be expressed as a story in a set of presuppositions, assumptions, sometimes true, sometimes partially or entirely false. We hold it consciously or subconsciously. We bring it out maybe consistently or inconsistently, but that it provides the foundation on which we live, we love, and we have our being. That is how profound worldview is. Remember the quote we started with, you know, for William Temple. If what we believe is wrong and we are convinced, it's just like a jihadist belief that he needs to kill. There are 700 virgins waiting for him in Al-Jannah, and he will do anything. It's conviction. So that's our worldview. It's the story about everything that gives us meaning and helps us to make sense of life. Is the lens through which we view everything and experience life. Please, if you have any question, just buzz in and just stop me if you have a comment. I like the way N.T. Wright defined worldview. It's a worldview is not looking into the world. It's looking through a world into the world. All of us, we have these specs on that we use, you know, to look at the world. So we have our, you know, specs on and we look through it. If I'm wearing a spec that is colored, the color of your shirt or your dress will be altered by what I'm wearing, and that will be my reality. I can argue with you that your shirt is blue. We often make jest of a particular tribe in Nigeria, of a Fulani man who wore a sunshade for the first time. And he's told the sun, run, it's going to rain. Make haste. The rain is looming, because everywhere I just grew dark because he was wearing a sunshade. The man was so convinced that it was going to rain. That is what worldview does to us. And many times it's what we've held for a long time, that if we hear anything contrary, we will argue it. So a worldview influences the way we think or act in the world. Worldview creates our reality. It's how we see reality. it's our cultural values, it's how thinking is done. So a Western way of thinking is a worldview. An Asian way of thinking is a worldview. And many times people pick on worldviews by influence. And let's begin to take it to what we want to talk about. The way we consider the relationship between the material world and the spiritual world is a worldview that has rattled the Christian faith. Because of Greek influence in the gospel, the world will now see two dimensions, the material world and the spiritual world. And the way we look at it is that the spiritual is always superior. And let me get ahead of myself. That's why we think that we need to go into full-time ministry for us to really be able to serve God. And that has affected the way many have walked over the years, those who are adherents of this Christian faith. So that brings us back to the Great Commission. The Great Commission now gives us a worldview dilemma. Because when we really read the Great Commission, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, it produced two, many times because of our worldview is conflicting. A believer is wearing two caps, but those caps complement. But if our worldview is not absolutely biblical, we will see it as two non-complementary caps. It's a theology cap and a sociology cap. It has to do with God, which is theos, and it has to do with society, which is socio. We can't talk about God and not talk about something that affects humans. And if we talk about something that affects humans and God is not in the conversation, we will misinterpret humans or societal construct. This is the mind of a 9-year-old girl. They asked this 9-year-old girl to draw a graphic illustration of how the father works, what you observe from the father. By the way, the father is a pastor. And this is what she drew. When you look at this picture, what comes to mind? Don't overlook at it because you might be too analytical.
He got pulled by two different sources. So one left, one right. He's stretching himself.
Yeah.
Or the other way you can look at it, you can see him as a bridge. So that could be a different interpretation. Okay. But in one point, it's like church, sunny, world, cloudy, pollution. Then he is stretching himself.
Yeah.
I see a separation. As she's seeing a separation between his pastoral duties and what in her mind, I think, because of her father's behavior are the worldly duties, something like that. Okay. That he's being pulled, something like that. That's what I see.
Any other person?
I see that the man looks confused because he's divided, trying to embrace both, but perhaps he doesn't know where to end.
That's what the 9-year-old girl saw.
Yeah.
So you can see the church there with the steeple, and then the symbol of light, and then you can see some industries here. There's a high-rise building, and then it's covered in darkness. So this guy has an intention. How do I bring light into this darkness? So that's what we want to be able to sift through, because we see this division. We see this division. So that this worldview of spirit and material. For someone like Alan, maybe you've heard, I play gospel music. I don't play secular music. I'm in a secular world. Those are the kind of things we want to sift through. So it produced a gospel worldview dilemma, and it shapes the way we communicate the gospel to the world. I would tell some of my church members, I said, never put a scripture on social media. It doesn't really mean anything. because the world can only read the Bible that has become flesh. That's what we see from the Bible. Okay, I'm throwing in some thoughts there. So when we look at Christianity, there are two major worldviews, and it's shaped by the historical Christianity and missional Christianity. One is the Eastern, where many of our Korean, brothers and sisters come from. And the other is the Western. In the Eastern orientation, in the Hebrew culture, where the gospel came out from, the worldview there is, it comes out of wholeness. Wholeness. But when the Greek orientation came into it, it brought in the dualism. That there is a realm that is spiritual, there is a realm that is physical. And this is the worldview that has caused us to be so confused. I'm sorry, my screen is not bringing all that out. But if my thoughts stir up questions, then we can actually clarify. So this is a kind of a table that gives us the difference between these two worldviews that have shaped Christianity over the years: the Eastern Hebrew, the Western Greek. Reality is whole. In the Greek is two essences. In the Eastern Hebrew culture, when you say beauty, it's not primarily what you see, it's function. Purpose is primary. But in Greek, it's physical. Form is primary. When you talk about knowledge, wisdom, in the Hebrew, sense, it's revelation, it's enlightenment. In the Greek, it's logic, it's reasoning. We're going somewhere, we're going to tie this to work, mission, and ministry. God is total reality. You don't start to describe God from the physical to the spiritual. And if you start from the physical, from the spiritual too, then it can begin to make sense. But here is described in human terms. Religion is a way of life. Here it's measured in terms of rituals. How long did you pray? How many meetings did you have? Let's take it further. So when we put on these specs and look at the world, what do we see in terms of work? We see a division over the years. This is the challenge that the church has faced: sacred work and secular work. We want to use the Bible to process this. So we have God's word has been incorrectly split into two. So we have some work that we call worthy everlasting work. Spiritual, it is sacred. And some are mundane, temporal, and unworthy. The spiritual are the work that is directly related to, to church, missionaries, ministers, pastors, evangelists, and undertake that. What has to do with home, school, health services, business, and all this, we say they are in the secular realm. Does the Bible affirm this, critique this? That's what we want to try and find out. So we have the idea in the West that has spread to Africa and Asia that it's only the work of pastors and missionaries that is God's work. But what the Bible reveals is that Christians have been sprinkled like salt. When he said we are the salt of the earth, he wasn't talking to only a category of people. When he says we are the light of the world, he wasn't talking to only a particular category. When he says these signs shall follow them, it was follow them that believe, not the pastor, not an apostle, not an evangelist. So we have this roots, these colonial roots that we have to, the fear of being syncretic, it frustrates, that there are some things we don't want to touch. I was talking to a group of youths here in, in the city today that, there was a musician there, and he said he was invited to come and play in a club, to come and perform in a club. and the poster came out, and a lot of Christians were bashing him. And he said when he got to the club, he saw a lot of Christians there. He saw a lot of Christians there. And that he saw also a lot of people who are not Christians, but he saw it as a platform that all this, the singing he's been doing has been to Christians. This is an opportunity for him to sing, but we don't believe that. And I said, that's where we normally find Jesus in the Bible, in the pub, among sinners. I think he spent more time in those places than in the synagogue. In fact, every time you get to the synagogue, there's quarrel. The gospel began on the street. And what takes us to the street, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I always talk about this when I talk about, to African audience. The gospel began on the street, and it can only be effective on the street. And what takes us to the street is work. So today in the church globally, we have a lifestyle of church on Sunday, and we have another life for work for the other 6 days. I always tell the funny story of a chaplain I met in Kenya. I was talking about this, and he said that he has a story to tell. He said one day he came back from school and the mom descended on him and really gave him a good beating. What was his offense? He said he wore church shoe to school. The shoe was meant for church. He wore it to school. I don't know if that makes sense to any of us, what I'm trying to say. There is this particular shoe is for Sunday. How dare you wear it on Monday? We still believe that Sunday is a holy day. There's a particular way to behave on Sunday. This is the worldview that we need to change. There is a life for Sunday, and there's a life for work on the other 6 days. This worldview has colored our perception of the workplace and the activities there. So we have a behavior for Sunday. We have another behavior for Monday. So the church, we have unwittingly, sometimes deliberately, taught believers that only pulpit ministry is the work of God. And that has led to a lot of abuse. A lot of people have forced themselves into this pulpit ministry because they sincerely want to serve God. We have abstained from a lot of places because we don't believe that we can serve God there. There are two church models in the world today that I came up with. I call one the cruise ship, and the other one the warship. The cruise ship, when you see this ship, what comes to mind?
Parties and excess.
Relaxation.
Holiday, relaxation, yeah. What else?
Contains so many people.
Yeah. There's everything you need is on this ship.
Yeah.
If you want to play lawn tennis, if you want to go swimming, if you want to, it's on this ship. This is the way many churches are actually structured today. Everything, it's a come, and really a cruise ship is not really going anywhere. They just go around and come back to where they left. But warship, this is a deck where these planes come. There are soldiers there. There are officers there. Instructions is going out here. There is equipping going on here, and they are sent on mission. And then they come back. They get debriefed. If there's injury, they are treated. Church is supposed to operate like a warship. The gospel Jesus bequeathed to us was a come and a go. come and go. Church operates by rhythm of gathering, and then we scatter. We gather, we scatter. I always tell pastors that your church building is like a gas station. It's a petrol station. Your members come on Sunday, you fill them up, and then they go out and expend it. By Saturday, they are really low on gas. By Sunday, maybe some tanks are empty. So they come, you fill them up again. If a car lives in the gas station, it's faulty. But when we have a church that is program-based, as opposed to people being developed and being deployed, I read an article and I was able to see, maybe Temple can help me with this, that the word mass that the Catholics use to describe their meeting is actually from a Latin word, now you are dismissed. That's the word mass. It means now you are dismissed. So the purpose of gathering is to go. But today we have preached a gospel that is quantitative. It's a gospel of get saved. It's salvation of souls. It's heaven focused. Inner piety. My professor, Paul Stephen, will say it this way. I think I have the confidence of saying, I haven't heard it from me. He said the most damning heresy of the church over the ages is that Christians are saved to go to heaven. He says the most damning heresy. But the quantitative gospel of the kingdom saves the whole person. The persons are sent to go and save systems, to save structures, to save relationships, to save nature, to save places and spaces. So if you have questions, please stop me. So let's look at now the foundation of the worldview that might be biblical, especially as I do with work. When you look at the Bible, is there really a sacred secular divide? What we see in the Bible is, what we normally know is that there's a spiritual world, there's a material world. But the Bible actually merged both. That the material world that we see, they come out of the spiritual world. The things which are seen, they come out of the unseen. They are connected. So when the Bible becomes our lens, we discover that there's no such divide. Now, the second paragraph there is key, and I want us to look at it. What we see is that all of human activity, which is work-based, may be carried out either in harmony with God or in opposition to God. Whatever we do on earth, we can do it either in harmony with God or in opposition to God. If you see a rifle, it can be an instrument of peace, it can be an instrument of destruction. If you see an airplane, it can be a means of transportation. Somebody can use it as a bomb. All human activity can be carried out either in harmony with God or in opposition to God. This is a graphic illustration of that. Bible reveals that there is a domain of darkness, there's kingdom of light. These are some sample activities: business, education, art, home, music, sports, church, law and order, human sexuality, medicine, banking, engineering, science, invention. All this can be carried out either in harmony with God or in opposition to God. Whoops, I need to bring that back. What do you guys think of this? Because this is central to what we are discussing today. So it's not really what you do is how you do it. Any thoughts, any questions?
I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm right. I'm thinking of a lack of a middle ground, that there is no middle ground in work, in what we do. We are either building, working, following what God intended us to do, or we are working against that. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I have a conflict there. Maybe there are some things that I would do that are in line with what God intended me to do. But then there are other things that me, the same person, may be doing that are against what he intended me to do. Like I can be that father of that 9-year-old, being in two worlds.
Let me give an example. And it's an example that happened in the course of the discussion this week. We're talking about cigarette, right? Someone that works in a cigarette company. Because we say Christians shouldn't work in a cigarette company. You know that when you look at it from cigarette, you are starting the story from the middle. God didn't create cigarette. God created tobacco. Tobacco is good. In fact, I grew up in a village setting. If someone passes out of gas, the quickest way to get a person back to life is to have the person sniff tobacco. If you just put it close to the mouth, the person will jack back to life. If you have ever gone through surgery, that might be far. If you have ever taken Coca-Cola, you have taken cocaine, because they are from coca leaf. If you take a malt drink and maybe highly alcoholic beer, they are both from barley. It is the fermentation that takes it to that level. So this is the way to look at it. So barley or tobacco in the hands of a godly person will give you health. Tobacco in the hand of an ungodly person will give you something called cigarette that ruins your lungs. So the issue shouldn't be whether Christians should work here or not. Because like Harry said, in a very profound way, the person that works in the cigarette company, he gets paid, he uses the money to educate his child. Would that be godly work? You can say where the guy is working and is making people smoke. You see, the lines are so blurry. It's doing some good. But where we need to take responsibility is that how did God's creation get to the hand of the ungodly? And they are using it to hurt humanity. Because good things, in fact, let me tell you the story. I don't know whether this product is in Asia or maybe in America. It's Guinness Stout. It's actually from Ireland. I think it's 1759 that now, Arthur Guinness, who started that company, was a Christian. In fact, Os Guinness, you know, is actually a descendant of that man. Arthur Guinness and Oswald Chambers were contemporaries. So Os Guinness was actually named after Oswald. Now, the story is the problem in Dublin, Ireland at that time was alcoholism. And he prayed to God, how can I be of use here? And God asked him to go and set up a brewery. Now, that will shock a lot of Christians. Now, he set up the brewery. In fact, when Obama visited Dublin the last time, he was offered that original style. It was highly insignificant in alcohol. It was like 1.52% alcohol. Years later, the pattern God gave to Arthur Guinness became what is used globally for drug rehabilitation. When you want to take someone out of drug, you give the person a lower version. You don't yank the person off drugs. You give him a lower version of that drug, and gradually you can win this person off it. There are many things like that that we have demonized. There are stories upon stories upon stories upon stories like that, that you can do things bad or do things wrong. Church can be for evil. In fact, by the way, you know, the word church originally has nothing to do with Christianity. It's just a group of people in an exclusive club. That's what it means. It called out people. You have to be invited to be there. That's what church meant originally. Sex can be done in a holy way. It can be done in a prostitution as a trade. So there's nothing you do in this world. Sex between husband and wife is holy, and it can also be unholy if it's not between husband. So that's what we're looking at here. Any other thought? Am I making sense, please? Because of the sharing, I can't really see all the faces, because I want to catch your expressions.
Dr. Todd, I have a question. It actually goes back to what you mentioned earlier. Patrick here. The idea of the Western view and the Eastern view, right? I am from Western, so I know that we have been tainted by the Western view, in which I totally agree with. I just trying to figure out, is it that this is based on location? And if, who would fall under the Eastern view?
When I say, good question. When I say Eastern view, I'm talking about the context. You know, God used, and this is where we make a lot of mistakes sometimes. God used the culture of the Hebrews. In fact, they didn't have a culture until he called Abraham. He used that culture to communicate the gospel. And that has confused us over the years. He used the culture to communicate the gospel. He used their culture. That's why we use the cross, and the cross at that time, it was a Roman thing, because at that time, the Romans were the ones, they colonized Israel. And the cross is a means by which they crucify or they kill notorious criminals. So he used that culture to communicate the gospel. And when you look at that culture, when they say work, in fact, they have in the Hebrew language is one word for work and worship, is avoda. So if someone said, I'm going to the office, it's actually saying, I'm going to worship. Remember when Abraham was going to kill the son, he said, myself and this boy were going there to go and worship.
Yeah.
When Moses said, let my people go that they may serve me, is avoda. When God said Adam should tend the garden, the word tend is the same word used for what the priest does in the temple, to make sure that he tend the fire that doesn't go out. So you see somebody walking in the field and somebody walking in the, in the temple, they are both worshiping. So for them, worship is not a song. I hope Alan is listening. And for Pentecostals and evangelical, worship is not just a song, it's a slow one. It's the one that is slow in tempo. The fast one is praise, right? And the slow one is worship. So, but the word worship originally has nothing to do with a song. It was a lifestyle. It was a lifestyle. So that is what but when those who brought the gospel to us, they separated that there's a realm that is unseen, there's a realm that is seen, and they are different. The unseen realm is even superior. That's what they said. And that's where the whole idea of we toil here and then we are going there to rest. Adrias, you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh. So may I continue?
Yes, please.
I'm trying to say that there are multiple worldviews. Then I am really confused. How are we going to reconcile them in a really heavenly way?
In a what?
Heavenly or godly way.
Heavenly.
What would be a system that we should use? Perhaps so my brother was saying Eastern worldview, Western worldview, then you have biblical worldview, then again, secular worldview, so and so. So how would be a system created to reconcile them? Thank you.
Good question. What we are saying now that when we use the Bible to look at the world, there is no division between sacred and secular. I think my next slide will clarify that. Right? That the Bible doesn't create that distinction. What we see is that, like this poet said, Wendell Berry, he said, there are no sacred and unsacred places. There are only sacred and then desecrated places. So I use the example of tobacco and cigarette. I use the example of coca leaf that can be used to produce anesthesia to benefit humans. And the same coca leaf is also used to produce cocaine that people sniff and they go out of. So coca leaf that is used to produce anesthesia, the sacredness of it is maintained. When it becomes cocaine, it has been desecrated. Is this clear, please, to everyone? So it's in whose hand has God placed it? This is a quote from my friend's book, Christian Overman. It says, since there is nothing which stands outside of God's authority, you might need to go and check the meaning of secular. What is called secular? It means a realm where God has no control. Now, that doesn't exist. If God lost control there, it's because he doesn't have a vessel, doesn't have a channel. So he said, there is nothing which stands outside of God's authority. He is relevant to what goes on in civil government, how business functions, the way family members relate, the way local church functions. He is Lord of all and is no less relevant in one area of human endeavor than the other. I'm impressing this upon us because this is where we have a problem. We see the work of somebody who works in a bank as inferior to the work of a Christian who is a pastor. This is the issue that we are really dealing with. This is theology of work. That the banker is called just in the same way the pastor is called. But the church, we've not been able to develop that theology and doctrinal teaching that prepares all believers to live out the Great Commission. And in the Bible, we also see patterns. When you look at the Bible, when Jesus walked the earth, there was a conflict between two types of Jews, the Judean Jews and the diasporian Jews. Who are the Judean Jews? The Judean Jews are those who didn't go into Babylon in captivity. The diasporian Jews are those who went to Babylon and returned. And this conflict was going on when Jesus was alive there teaching. And it was that conflict he was trying to resolve that he told the parable of the prodigal son. So he gave them the parable to illustrate what they were going through. That a father had two sons, one took the inheritance and went away. But today when I read it, I call it the parable of the two prodigal sons. Both of them are prodigal. One took it, the inheritance, one did not receive it. And you know the story because we're all Bible scholars here. When the younger one came back home, the father threw a lavish party. And the older one was angry. And the father said, your brother was lost, he was dead, now he's alive. And he said, but I've been here, you have not thrown a party for me. What did the father say? All I have is yours. The two of you are my sons. Now, this today, you can use it to analyze what happens in the church about full-time workers in church and those who are, we call, part-time. The Judean Jews are those who work in church-based, maybe faith-based, something that is directly related to church. The ones who go work in other places, maybe join the military, maybe go into business, they are like those who went into exile and they'll come back. So that's what Jesus was trying, is still in the church, the schism between those who are behind the pulpit and those who are in the pew. I hope I'm making sense. We often use the story of the Bake family, to also communicate this. Ray, which is the first son in the family, he's the first son in the family. He's a sage, he's a theologian, he's an urban missionary. Dennis, in fact, Ray, is a Republican. Dennis is a Democrat. These two guys never agree on anything. In fact, there was a time when Dennis was working with Bill Clinton. Ray led a protest to the White House. These two guys never agree. Their brother, Lowell Barker, tells the story very well. He said when he has a problem, because Lowell was a pastor, he said when he has a problem and goes to Ray, Ray will say, go and read my books. He will go to Dennis, Dennis will say, read my lips. So when their father was going to pass on, Lowell went to the dad and said, what instructions do you have for us? And this is what the father said. He said, make Ray listen to Dennis about business and get Dennis to listen to Ray about missions, because the two of them are both serving God. This is what built Barker Graduate University, this statement. And their father wasn't educated. He wasn't an educated man. I'll tell you how much of uneducated he was. When Dennis got a scholarship to go to Harvard, he told the dad. The dad said, are you sure it's a good school? That is how uneducated the man was, but he understood something about God. That both Ray and Dennis are both serving God. And they need to. You have these people in your church. We have this relationship conflict every time. So Ray will be like that Judean Christian. Dennis will be like the diasporian Christian. The pastor many times see the guy who goes to work out there as a waste of time. And the guy too, because that's what he believes, he can't wait to get back to church on Sunday, because that becomes his safe cocoon. But we are salt, the Bible says, and we are light. Salt is of no use if nothing is going to get rotten or something needs to be sweetened. Light is of no use if everywhere is bright. Let me use something that we might be able to also relate with. Well, it's a household chart. This guy said, sometimes I think I have the worst job in the world. And someone also who lived in the same room with this guy all the time, said, do you really think so? That you have the worst job in the world? Right? It's this guy. What's going on here? This is what happens in many Christian communities. But what's going on? We compare, we compete, but these guys are just unique in a common mission of health and hygiene. They are unique in a common mission of health and hygiene. So what do we need to do as church? We need to begin to recognize, respect, affirm, develop, and deploy the uniqueness of every member of the household of faith. Because all are called. There are no uncalled Christians. I used to teach in a Baptist seminary in Nigeria, you know, the Baptist Theological Seminary, and you hear the graduate said, after the graduate, they say, I'm waiting for the call. We'll talk more about that by the time, you know, during our session on the call. Say, I'm waiting for the call. I said, so what brought you to the seminary? I thought it's because you are called that you came here to get trained. The call he's talking about is being employed by a church. These are the misunderstandings that we have. So the church is a rhythm of gathering and dispersing and deploying and being deployed. That's what the church is. So the church needs to get back to a sending-oriented worldview. The gospel Jesus bequeathed to us is a come and go. How the problem of that pastor was solved is to make the church a sending agency. Now, if you compare this picture with the 9-year-old, we have worked on it, we have theologically processed it. How can we help that pastor? He had to be sending people out because he was trying to take the church to the street and he was doing it alone. But when every member of the household of faith is a minister of the gospel, that is biblical because every church agrees to the universal priesthood of the believer. All believers are ministers, all are priests, all are called, all are sendable. So a biblical worldview of calling, of work, it recognizes the universal priesthood of the people of God. So a critical worldview edit that we really need to have. It's impossible to go to church. If you tell someone in the book of Acts that you're going to church, they don't understand what you're saying. As church, they move from place to place. They meet from house to house. Where is the church? It's here, it's here, it's here, here. It's everywhere believers are. So a biblical worldview negates that sacred secular divide. A biblical worldview negates that only some category of people are called. A biblical worldview says everywhere a believer works, that's his ministry. Every believer has a pulpit. There's a family that I got to know in the UK. For those who watch, the English Premier League soccer, the guy played, he's a Nigerian, played for Newcastle. The father is a pastor. And he had this understanding that football is your career. When he was much younger, if he goes to play and gets a caution on the pitch, when he gets home, the father will punish him. Say, you had a bad testimony today. Because that's where you live out your call. So these are my thoughts. I'll stop sharing. Wow. And then we can, any thoughts, any comments, any questions? Suni,
yes,
I hope I didn't give you too much work. All right, go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, I want to go back to your kind of the chat.
Yeah.
The
that chat,
conversation
right?
between the conversation between
and the tissue paper. Yeah.
Yes, and yes, I agree with you that their work is part of very important ministry for the benefit of others, hygiene and health. Yes, I agree about that. But the thing is that from toilet papers and toothpaste point of view, I don't think they would be very happy about their work. And this is also related to our previous theme of redemption mandate. When our distorted workplace is restored, to, like, Garden of Eden, for example, the perfect, condition,
Mhm.
then I think, the people should enjoy, feel joy while working. And whether you feel joy while you're working is one of the very important elements that make the place is really meaningful or not. But if, like, toilet papers and toothpaste, if we do not feel happy while we are working for the ministry, then can we still say that that is very important?
Good question. The reason the tissue paper is not happy is because he wants to be a toothbrush. He wishes a toothbrush. But if the tissue paper knows that I am created as tissue paper, this is my identity. We are not happy many times because, you see, human beings, we often value what we don't have. What we don't have is always of a higher value. That's where envy comes in. But if tissue paper knows that I am tissue paper, and that's my call, if tissue paper is taught to accept itself as tissue paper, then he will be fulfilled. But we have been taught in church, if you are not a pastor, you are not really serving God. If you are not, maybe you're not called into ministry, maybe you're not. So we often desire to be something else. And that's where the joy eludes us. So joy eludes us where it's either we're, not working right, or we are not doing the right work. If you try and use the tissue paper to brush your teeth, that will be really, something. That will really be something. You are unique in your own way, and this is what to tell our children, this is what to tell our members, this is what to tell ourselves, and I believe that's what God is telling us. Yeah. Harry?
Yeah, I would also say that I think it's easy to forget that discomfort is also a part of expressing our purpose, because you can't have growth without discomfort.
Without pain, that's right.
One of the things that I found myself doing when I was the short version is it took me 20 years to get my bachelor's degree. I went to one of the top schools in the nation. I had to withdraw because of lack of money. And while I was in between that time, I was working as a salesperson, and I thought I was off purpose. But actually God was using that as pastoral training, because while I was selling diamonds, I did so much couples counseling, helping people understand their relationships and some of the issues and each other better. I was doing marital counseling and couples counseling and family counseling on the diamond counter, and didn't realize until after I got out that God had been preparing me for what he was going to have me do. And so I think sometimes this won't apply to every situation, but I think sometimes learning to submit completely to God's timing and his path is where we find that contentment, even in places where we're uncomfortable.
Thank you very much, Harry, for throwing that in. Yeah, you can, even if you're doing what you like to do, you will still go through some discomfort, some pain. It's just part of life. And, pain is a sign of health. If you have headache, it means you are healthy. Your body announced something is wrong. That means you are healthy. So pain is not bad. Discomfort is not bad. So that's something we need to get into our consciousness when it comes to do with work. And joy is not based on what's happening. Joy is based on truth. It's based on reality. This is my mission field, and I'm going to make the best of it. Thanks for that question, Daniel. Any other thought? Any other question? Yes, Joseph. Joseph, yeah, you need to unmute yourself. You are still muted. You are muted, Joseph. I can't hear you.
강남준 목사님, 네, 크시고.
All right.
들리세요?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm thinking about why the Korean church has lost its influence in our society in this day. Some says that the Christian worldview has not changed compared to the growth of external Christianity. This is very simple question, but it's related with about worldview. A few years ago, I met an American pastor. He was old and high positions, but he treated me like a friend. It was a culture shock. I have a question. Why is the reason why American pastors are not authoritative? I want to know your personal opinion.
Why they are not what? Authoritative? Or something?
American pastor.
Yes, why they are?
Is it because American pastors distinguish their position and roles well? Do you understand?
한국 목사님에 비해서 그렇다는 거예요? 한국 목사님에 비해서? 네.
그래서 미국 목사님들이 이렇게 권위적이지 않고 굉장히 이렇게 편안하시고 그런 것이 어떠한 그 본인의 어떤 목사직에 대한 그 어떤 포지션을 한국처럼 이렇게 권위적이지 않고 굉장히 편하게 대하시거든요. 그래서 그 이유를 조금 알고 싶었어요. 어떤
It seems to him that from his experience that American pastors not authoritarian as compared to pastors in Korea. There is any ground for in perception of the pastoral work or vocation?
Yeah, that's maybe the Americans too can talk about this who are here, but I believe that these things are cultural, right? I had a culture shock the first time I went to the US, and I'll call someone like Ray Baki by name. We don't do that in Africa. You know, if someone is that, I mean, Ray is almost like, 20, 25, 30 years older than me, and I call him by name. I struggle with that. So, but when you see the Korean pastor, you're calling the Korean pastor authoritarian might really be that you are comparing him to an American pastor. Because respect in America might be different from respect. For example, in my culture, when an elder is talking, you don't talk. And then you ask your question after. So you using the word authoritarian might be because you are now using the American lens to looking at your culture. Because there's a way father relate with son. But again, if you are saying that maybe the father is not developing the child, that might be global, right? But if it's that, if you can give an instance of these authoritarian tendencies, it might help us. Because when you look at it, in Nigeria, in Africa, I mean, someone calls the dad by name. Whoa, you call your father-in-law by name. Sam will know what I'm talking about. That's an abomination. You call someone older than you by name. No. And because we believe that the elder has our best interest at heart. I was teaching my wealth creation class yesterday, and a guy from Uganda said one of the ways that in their culture, historically, they take care of poverty is that every wealthy person takes in a poor person and begins to, groom the person. Now, we've lost all that. So, Joseph, I want you to look at Korean culture, in itself. How have we taken that into church? And how is the way the pastor relates with the members, is it any different with the way a normal father will relate with children? I don't know if Harry wants something to say. You say you guys are not authoritarian.
I just wanted to, I understood Joseph.
Go on, Osam, yeah.
I understood Joseph very well because the concept of the Korean pastor and that of the Western American pastor. I mean, these are different contexts entirely.
Yeah.
And we can see from Joseph's point of view that the Korean culture is in transition, where it's there is this conflict between, because the young Koreans, they are also Western influence, they are meeting a lot of other cultures, okay? And so it becomes a challenge for the church to recognize that there are different worldviews in the same church.
Absolutely.
And so to maintain rigidity, to be that rigid, you know, he is coming from where Joseph is coming from, because here, listening to him, he was so comfortable with the American pastor, you know, that the man made him feel comfortable. Could there be something the Korean pastor? That's, you know, the Korean culture is hierarchical, and even in the language, you don't speak the same language. The language you speak to your peers is different from the one you speak to the elders. Now here he meets the American pastor, who makes him feel like he's a friend. Okay. Now it would be wrong to expect the Korean to make that radical swing to the other extreme. Okay. So how best can what can the Korean pastor learn in dealing with the younger generation of their members who are, well, wearing the glasses, you know, the eyeglasses of the American within their cultural setup? It's a challenge, I think, even in the Korean church.
Thank you so much, Osam. Thank you very much for that, you know, for that insight, because we really need to understand that when we use the Bible, what is at stake here is relationship, respect, right? You know, some people knelt when Jesus was on the cross. They knelt. Kneeling, that gesture is of respect. But Bible said they knelt mocking him. So you can kneel and not respect, and you can stand and respect. The Bible, we want to establish truth. So what is truth here? What is being comfortable before an elder in my culture? What is their respect? And Osam made a very, very important point, because we live in a globalized world. It's in transition. But what I tell non-Westerners, please don't be eroded. Don't become Western. I've been campaigning everywhere in Africa. We don't have any business with democracy. We need to have our own African way of governance. We had a life before colonialism. You know, so that transition had to be properly managed. And it has to be the elderly ones. The young ones can really make an impact if they will not be frontal, if they will not confront, if they will make their case in a way that the elders will be comfortable. When they see the mutual benefit, they will support it. I don't know if that made any sense, you know, because I want to be global. I don't want to lose my African heritage. There are things good about the Western heritage. There's something good about Africa. I don't want to be a non-African. I still want to be an African as a Christian. I want the world to see what Jesus would look like as an African. Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, I think it's also important to realize the Western church, particularly in the United States, is plagued with individualism. So a lot of pastors, a lot of what the church has become irrelevant in the United States because they don't challenge people to live a godly life. They preach things that make people feel good on Sundays to really attendance up, but they don't really force you to be challenged by what God says in the Bible. They only talk about the things that people can digest easily and make them, you know, kind of stirred but not convicted. Yeah. And so what happens is a lot of pastors are friendly because they're really trying to keep their
members
coming. Right. They're trying that church growth. What Dr. Dodd was talking about, the quantitative reality, that is the problem with Western church right now, because if Western church, there's so many churches because people have issues and they just split and make another church. They don't work those issues out. They don't do the work. No one has the authority to keep you together enough where you're forced to work on those issues. You just take the minister and some of the congregants and go make another denomination down the street. And so I would say, don't be like the Western church, but be like the church that Jesus wants you to be in a cultural context that makes sense, because we got problems over here too, where that, you know, right now, like the issues that are going on with race, where Asian Americans were being attacked by people because of the coronavirus and all that craziness and misinformation, with Black people in the streets. There were pastors who were struggling to address these things from the pulpit, which makes zero sense. Like, of course you should be addressing it immediately, but they couldn't, or they were scared, or their church split, or some got set down. So I would say that the individualism, there are some positives about that relationship, but if you imagine a father who doesn't discipline their children, you know, versus the one that's on the other extreme, you both have a problem in that house, that family, whether you're on one extreme or the other. So we're just on the other end of that spectrum, but we're also struggling for relevance because our pastors are not able to traverse that popularity issue.
Thank you so much, Harry. That is so profound. And Joseph, that's it. And I think it's Idris who asked the question, how about inculturation? And I was drawn to that. One of the most exciting experience I've had in BGU was to supervise the dissertation of an Ethiopian. And his topic was how to preserve the Amharic language because it was being lost. You know, because Ethiopian, for those of us who are on this call who don't know, Ethiopian is the only African country that was never colonized. So they still retain, to a large extent, some sort of authenticity. You know, I went to the house of an Ethiopian and the wardrobe is made of woven mat. It's not wood. And he said, in this wardrobe, your clothes can't get damp because it's always aerated. I said, wow, that is so amazing. You know, so but right now, they are already speaking they're already putting a lot of English into the Amharic language. So the guy's dissertation is to come up with a strategy that they want to present to the government in a way to preserve the Amharic language, because one way of destroying culture is to remove the language. So some will agree with me, there's hardly any African language today that we can use to teach science. There's hardly anyone that we can use to teach science. So this is very important, that there are a lot of people that need to be deployed into various areas of ministry that will really, like Harry said, give us the gospel that Jesus wants us to preach. You know, so that relationship shouldn't be compared, Joseph, and I think that point is well made. Yes, Idris, you still have something to say? Because I was responding to your inculturation. Yeah.
Yes, I think you have explained very well, and I'm happy with that. Thank you very much, and I don't have much to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question? Any other thoughts?
Just wanted to thank you.
All right, Osam, go ahead.
Just wanted to.
Oops, your connection is. Oops. Well, we lost Osam there.
It's a very.
You have to repeat yourself, Osam.
Sorry.
We lost you.
Start over again.
Yeah,
you have to repeat yourself. We lost you there.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
Now we can hear you.
I was going to say Ephesians chapter 4 verses 11 and 12. Himself gave the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers to equip his people.
Yeah. for works of service.
Works of service. To equip the saints for ministry. And this, like just what you were saying, the church is meant to equip its members to go out and do ministry. The real ministry is done by the members. The work of the church is to equip. It's
absolutely. And it's so good that you made reference to that, because towards the end of this course, we are going to be using that Ephesians 4, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. We're going to be using that to assess ourselves. I think Harry did that in the last course. You know, we're going to be using it because we have reduced those apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher to titles. But these are actually the expressions of Christ's personality in his people. So each of us, we have the dimensions of it. There's a guy that I learned missiology from. His name is Alan Hirsch. And he has taken that, what we call the fivefold ministry, he's taken it beyond the theological understanding to the sociological understanding. Right? That what will, and because those words were not actually even in the church setting. These were vocations. So what we are going to be doing maybe in our 5th week is we're going to have an assessment of who we really are in Christ. Some of us are apostles, some of us are evangelists, some of us are, so I mean, if you see someone who is, you know, I did the assignment, I'm just getting ahead of myself here with a group of people. I divided them into 5, and I said, I want you to design businesses that express this fivefold ministries. And the apostle group designed a school, an elementary school. The evangelist group designed a media house. The prophet group designed a stockbroking firm. The teaching group designed a consultancy outfit. The pastors designed a hospital. So we need to be, whatever we get from God, where it finds expression is not within us, is as we interact with the world. And what is it that really the contact point between us and the world is our work. So if everybody needs to be a pastor, if Alan needs to just sing only praise and worship songs, if all we need to do is just within the confines of the church, then we won't touch the world. The gospel is a come so that you can be equipped, and then you go so that you can affect. That's the gospel. Pastors can't do that alone. There are many people who will never come to your church, but there is no place where the church will not go. There are many people who will never come to your church, but your members who are really the church, they will go to many places. But if they go, have they been equipped? Are they going on half tank? Are they going on empty tank? This is the issue that we are dealing with here. And the point Joseph made about culture is so critical. What works in America won't work in Korea. It won't work in Africa. Because we have bastardized the gospel here. Somebody was telling me here in Namibia today that they don't give pastors visa to come to Namibia because of what pastors have come to do here. So there's a guy who came to this country, calls himself a prophet. They will put a seat here and here. If you want to sit, you know, there, they said you pay a fee to sit close to him. You pay a fee close to him to sit close to him. And I said, well, we copied that from America. Yeah, because you want to see some pastors, you pay. Yeah, you have an appointment with the pastor, you pay. That's where we got all those kind of things. But I can't blame America if they put something on sale, I don't have to buy. I don't have to buy. So these are the issues, right? That the gospel must be contextualized. It must be contextualized for it to have effect. Any takeaways today? We have many. We may not be able to take all. I'm going to just call out Marcia. What will be your takeaway today?
I don't know. I guess one thing that is at the top of my mind is how I'm realizing, even in myself, even though I talk about all the time about each of us being a minister, just like we're talking about, and ministering in different ways, and our faith needs to be in the world. Our faith needs to be making a difference. I feel guilty because as I listen to this lecture, I realize what a hypocrite I've been in some ways in my own family. So I have a few of us who work in sort of like human services space. And then I have a brother who is a VP at a bank. And we have jokingly teased him. And I have told him many, many times, you know, it's like, you're on the dark side. You know, why don't you, we would joke about this, and I would say to him, you know, why, what, you know, you need to come in a space where, you know, you're meeting the needs of people and all of that. And as I said, very conflicted and very ambiguous, because I say all the time about us being the church. And I am one who so many people would say, you know, my child want to do this in life. My child, I recently talked to a friend who daughter, initially this child went to school to be a nurse. And then halfway into the semester, she said, no, she just feels this deep calling to be a social worker. She's realizing her voice in terms of advocacy and looking at those who are marginalized. And so I was talking to that mother, right? And encouraging her, like, oh no, you know, whatever gifts that is within her, you know, God placed them there for a purpose. We can't all be this or that. We are here to serve. But at the same time, I'm so guilty with, you know, quote unquote, joking to my brother that, you know, that the work that he is doing, he's on the dark side, and the work that he's doing is not ministry either. And so I think it's important that what I'm walking away with is making sure, right, as people of faith, and you know, being mindful of our worldview, and being mindful as to how I engage others, and being really making sure that whatever that is, that what I'm saying is what I'm really, really living and doing, and being to the, and I'm doing, so that it is not conflicted, and that folks can walk away feeling what I'm doing, I am being scattered. He's being scattered at the bank. That's his mission field.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
thank you, Marcia.
And so I appreciate this today. Appreciate this.
Thank you very much. You know, that's how worldviews, they die hard. Once you are established in it, it can really make you a hypocrite. You know, I'm going to church. You know, you're not serving God. You know, those kind of things, we've just, it's unconscious. You know, so our confession and our expression is not in sync. Yeah. Danielle, what would be your takeaway? I'm going to call 2 more people and then we'll close. Danielle, okay, I think.
Are you calling me?
Yes, you are signed up in 2 places. All right, that
yes,
works.
and yeah, because my computer doesn't give me any sound.
Okay,
so I
just
need
go
to
ahead.
turn on another one. Yeah,
no problem.
So my takeaway today was how you describe whatever God created is almost neutral. So it's not what you do, but it's how you do it, what you do with it.
Yeah.
And that was something that I think I need to think through and process, because I feel that so even, whatever is given to us is the way that we actually live out our worship or our work. It's not that I'm called to be a pastor, but I could be a pastor in any kind of setting. I think that's what you were saying. And also the way that you expressed that we need to find a Nigerian way of doing things and organizing. American way has their own way. So that's actually really a good point for me to think through, because I work in Cambodia.
Yeah.
So I need to find a Cambodian way of during church.
Absolutely.
And also bringing the theological work in that context. So that's my takeaway today.
Fantastic. Everything in this world has the capability of being used for good or for evil.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I tell people, don't apologize that you don't speak English. I don't speak Korean. Don't apologize that you don't, you know. So we need to be comfortable in our skin. It doesn't really matter how people look at you, because that's not the standard, right? The standard is God. I don't know the language God speaks. I don't know God, the skin, I mean, the color of God's skin. I don't, you know, so those kind of things. And only the church, like Harry said, we need to declare that from the pulpit. And not just the Sunday pulpit. There's a way someone who is a social worker will address the issue of race, the issue of inequity. There's a language that is spoken in that area. There is, so if that's what the scripture says, there's nowhere where the voice is not heard. You know, there's nowhere where the voice is not heard. So the church is the hope of mankind. If we continue to malfunction, mankind will continue to sink and sink and sink. Yeah. Who else? Alan, what's your takeaway today?
All right. Well, there's a lot, to be honest. Well, thanks for reminding me about that, the Hebrew way, looking at things, and the Greek dualism. That was actually one of my enlightenment 7-8 years ago when I first started my worship study. So thanks for bringing that back to me. I have long forgotten about, you know, it's the oneness, the one essence.
Yeah, one essence.
And the way of life, and it's not ritual pleasing worship. So that is one of the, thanks for that, because that has been long gone Fantastic. In my mind. But I really like the two church models, cruise ship and worship.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say we need to worship on a warship. We need to worship on. The reason why is, well, if because I studied worship, so we have this fourfold model of worship, which is gathering words from God, then Holy Communion as a response to God, and then scattering, which is sending. So I think Dr. Dodd did talk about this. You know, we gather, we gather, and then we scatter. So that is actually what we believe the worship model is to be like. But of course, there are different model. But the fourfold is what I've been studying. So yeah, worship on a worship, on a worship. So not just gathering, sing song, be happy, but yet, you know, don't forget, we gather for the reason of scatter and send forth to the world in peace.
Fantastic. So I'll leave the last voice to whosoever. Anyone? You just have something to say?
I think I need to.
Okay, Sunil.
Yeah, I'm trying to speak on behalf of Konu Kang. Pastor Kang, that his question is that as a pastor, he also agrees that the work of God should not be limited to the ministry and service within the church. Mm-hmm. And he also agrees on the all believers priesthood and their vocation, calling. But on the other hand, there is kind of misunderstanding that people in the church, they are challenging, they are present challenge to the role of pastors, which should not be particular. It should not be professionally respected in the church. If that case happens, how do we treat people who are the presenting challenge to the role of pastors? So everybody is a priesthood. It can be misunderstood that in that way in the church everyone should have enjoy the same equal role and the positions the church. Then what do you think of such kind of the potential threat? He said threat or challenge.
Yeah, I think, Sunil, what a lot of pastors have that fear, right?
Yeah.
A lot of pastors have that
Yeah.
fear. But
Yeah,
what
많은
will
목사님들
solve
그건
the
또
problem?
있죠. Yeah, go ahead.
What will solve the problem is sincerity. Sincerity.
우리 해결은 오직 우리의 신실함에 있습니다.
Sorry? Are you trying to interpret?
I'm just translating.
Okay.
Sentence by
Yeah,
sentence. Yeah.
Sincere. You have to be sincere. You need to also teach it with that sincerity. The pastor needs to allow himself to be vulnerable.
예, 우리 신실함으로 사람들을 가르치되고 우리 자신을 연약한 모습으로 드러낼 필요가 있습니다.
And the pastor needs to be comfortable in his skin. That's why this is so anchored on identity. That nobody can do the things that God has given you to do. The only reason. Okay.
네, 누구나 각자의 독특한 소명인과 역할이 있듯이 그것을 또 인정해야 되는 것이죠. 목회자의 역할과 소명도 마찬가지로 독특합니다. Yes.
So if you are not threatened, the problem is solved. If you can bring others on to come and work with you, the problem is solved.
Yeah, without comparison and competition, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 그런 경쟁과 비교 없이 그럴 때 우리가 위협감을 느끼지 않는다면 우리의 사역을 신실하게 감당할 수 있습니다. 예.
And if I make a final point, the reason everybody desires to be a pastor is the way we have elevated that position.
우리가 아마도 모든 사람들이 막 목사같이 되고자 하는 것도 벌써 목사라는 것이 너무 이렇게 큰 우월한 역할이라는 사람들이 선입견이 있기 때문에 아닐까 싶습니다. Yeah.
All right. So, thank you very much, Sunny, for a good job. And pastors are critical. Pastors are important. You know, the reason churches were actually licensed as charity historically is because the government recognized that there are things beyond their power that only the church can do it. You know, Rebecca will tell the story of, crime that was in Chicago when he was working there. And when they get these criminals, they will bring him in as a priest. So the police precinct chief will say, prison or priest? Which one do you want, the prison or priest? The men all the time, they choose the priest. And he said, follow the priest. If you have to listen to everything the priest says. If you don't, you are going to prison. So the reason we have tax exempt and all those kind of things is because it's already assumed that we offer something to society. And we can do it much more effectively now when we structure the church to be a community of ministers, where everyone is affirmed, is developed, is trained, and deployed. As we're going to find out as we go on, there is nowhere in the Bible, this is going to be my final thought, there's nowhere in the Bible where people are ordained with titles in the church. Nowhere. There is nowhere in the Bible where there's ordination with titles. Nowhere. There's no title in the Bible. That's why you will not see the Bible say Apostle Paul. It's Paul who is an apostle. Philip, who is an evangelist. I don't know where the title thing comes from. Maybe some of you here can give me the history, but titles were never part of the package in the Bible. There's no ordination where some are set apart and some are inferior. The whole house, it was a holy nation, royal priesthood, sent forth to demonstrate the beauty of God to the world. So this is what we're. So next Saturday again, let's see our conversations this week. There are videos to watch, there are materials to read, and I think by next week you should turn in your sample book report. The sample book report. And if you have any questions as regards, the Populi and all those kind of things, you can always send me an email. I respond to my emails as soon as possible. Right. So take care, everyone. Who wants to close us in prayer? If there's none, God bless you all. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dot, can you ask you about the journal? Do we need to send to our PLC or we do not need to? Because I'm new to BGU, so this journal
you can choose to send to them. You can decide to send to them, but if not, yeah, you can decide. I especially when I travel, you know, for courses, I do my journal and I mail it to them. But you know that you still have to submit your journal as part of your final paper, right? Yeah, cool. But you can send it to them, yeah. You can send it to them, they can make inputs and then you can come back and rewrite and, you know, but your journal need to be very conversational. It's as if you are writing to them. You are giving them, you know, an idea of what's happening in the class. It's like you are a reporter giving them, you know, what Alan said, what Marcia said, Apofia said this, he asked a question. You don't have to write all that, what resonates with you. So it's like a journal of your experience in the class that you are carrying your PLC along. Because the journey with you all through your course, by the time you are even doing your dissertation, they should be part of the audience. So that's it. So you can send it to them. Or you can finish the whole 8 weeks and send the whole to them, whichever way. But it's not an academic requirement that you should send to them. You are not graded for that. Yeah. Good.
I'm sorry, that's a good question. Thank you, Alan. Dr. Dan, are we to how we're supposed to submit it? Like next week or something to you as well?
You mean the journal?
Yes.
No, the journal is chapter 2 of your final paper. You're not supposed to submit.
I see. Okay.
Yes, but if you write the journal, if you write the journal and you want me to see whether you are online, whether you've done it right, you can send it to me. I can make comments, but that won't be the grading. Yeah, that won't be the grading. Yeah, we do it for the book report. You are supposed to send in a sample book report.
Okay.
Just for me, it's not going to be graded. Just for me to say, okay, this is what is expected. This is not. This is, you know, yeah, that's it.
Me, that sample book is chosen by us or?
Yeah, you can choose any of the books. Yeah, any of the readings. You know, there's some specific readings.
Yes.
In the syllabus. Yeah, it has to be one of those.
Oh.
And if you can't lay your hands on any of those, and if you notice that there's any book you can use, you can contact me. I will check it out and see whether it's appropriate. But we have the required, and then the optional is a longer list. So you can pick anyone from that. But when you want to pick from the optional, you still need to contact me that I can't get the required. I want to pick from the option.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Suni, I hope you'll be able to explain these things to them, how to do the assignments. Yeah. Yes, since you and Joel will be grading their work, so that should be right.
Right.
Any other? These are good questions, and please keep it coming during the class. And if you encounter anything in the course of the week, you can send me an email also.
Thank you so much.
Apofia, are you good? Apofia, are you good?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Thank you.
So have a great weekend all. And Suni, you want to stay behind and let's, you know, maybe tidy up some things.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.